me, Dr. Jen from Wellness in 2 Words here, and welcome to my video about the vaccine updates. So there's a lot of information out there, a lot of ground to cover, and I have attached with this post my homemade graphic that you can refer to that will kind of help as a reference for some of the things we're going to be talking about for vaccine machinery. So my Wellness in 2 Words phrase for tonight is, I was going to say be brave. It sounds like a judgment, so just get vaccinated would be a better one, because some people have had not good experiences with vaccines. Some people have fear about vaccines. I don't want to make this talk a discussion about that, because it's an individual choice. I don't think it should be mandated by the government, but I think everyone should be highly encouraged to understand how these vaccines work and why I'm choosing to do it, and why I'll be choosing to do it for my family, because the new generation of vaccines are simply awesome, which is why I made this video, so that you can kind of understand that. So you've probably heard recently that there's like 4 big companies that are kind of at the front of the pack, I guess. And there are 2 of them that are messenger RNA vaccines, and there are 2 that are viral vector vaccines, which basically means they use a virus to get the genetic messaging into the cell so that the cell can make the things that it needs to make an immune response. So let me kind of explain, and my graphic actually helps with that. And my husband was like, I think you're making it harder or more complicated than it is. I was like, it's already complicated. I'm trying to make it simpler. So hold on. Let me just refer to my little image. This may help. I want you to imagine that your cell is a house, okay? So, oh gosh, here comes a kitten. See, this is when you're trying to make videos from home. So your cell is a house. Inside, so this is the house, right? And outside you have a yard with a fence, privacy fence, so it keeps everything inside. That is your cytoplasm. That's like the yard of the cell where all of these activities happen. But here's your nucleus, and inside it is your computer, which is like your hard drive, which has got a bunch of files on it that you really want to keep safe and keep protected. So the file there is what codes for various different information. So the new vaccines, the mRNA, are like USB drives that they get information from the computer, but then they detach, and then they go out into the cytoplasm and do stuff. So it's like you're in your house, you take your USB, you transfer the file for the thing that you need onto your USB drive, and then you walk out the front door and close it so that the house is still secure. The original file doesn't change. It's protected inside. And then you take that USB drive and go out and do stuff with it in the yard. Okay, so I don't know if that makes any sense. That's what the messenger RNA is the USB drive. And it's portable. It can go things. It can like go places and do things. So now I've got up here, it says copier, right? It's not like we're all gonna have like a printer or a copier sitting in our front yard, but imagine if you have to make tons and tons of copies of something, you don't have room in your house. The copies that we're gonna make are gonna be for the spike protein. He's wanted. We want to see him, FBI most wanted list, recognize him when you see him and know that he's bad news. And so in order to circulate these wanted posters that were created on the original hard drive, transferred to the USB, the RNA, and then now you've plugged that into your copier, you're going to make lots of copies of this wanted spike protein wanted poster. So when you do that, you're going to put them in your front yard. You're going to do all kinds of different stuff with them. You may make so many of them that they spill out into the street. The flyers may fly away. And so that often when proteins are made in a cell, like this spike protein flyer, then it's going to go out into the bloodstream, which is like here the cul-de-sac or whatever, and then it's going to circulate on, and people will see it, and they'll be like, ooh, what is this? Who's this spike guy? So the way Moderna and Pfizer work is they actually have this USB drive in little bubbles, little liposomes, or well, it's fancier than that. It's nanotechnology, but and then they have them like in a bubble wrap, basically, and they put it in the mailbox, and it goes into the cell, and then you use the USB drive to make the wanted posters and the spike protein, and then that helps circulate it. So it's fragile. That's why it has to be kept at cold temperatures. It's in bubble wrap. It's encased in the lipids because it's a charged, unstable molecule, and that protects it, and then it can go on and do stuff within the cell. So at some point when you get so many protein copies made, they're just like, you know what, this is like a lot of these, so let's just make a billboard instead, attach it to a protein called a peptide, and it's called a MHC peptide, and it basically is a billboard that it's at the front of the yard, at the membrane of the cell, and the other immune circulating cells see it, and it's getting their attention. It's like, hey neighborhood, look, this guy's bad news, we need to, if you see Spike, go get him, kind of thing. Now, Johnson & Johnson and AstraZeneca actually have a vaccine that's a viral vector. So it's like using a delivery truck, if you will, instead of a USB drive. It's not as elegant, it's kind of messy. They have to pull up to the gate, they dump the stuff out, the flyers kind of go everywhere, that kind of thing. So the virus infects it, it basically goes in the gate, dumps the stuff in, and then things happen from there. And you recognize the wanted poster like Spike's bad news. So it's not as elegant, it can be messier, more cleanup involved. A lot of those vaccines have more inflammation, but they do the job. They put a ton of copies out there for your immune system to recognize. So, so they're different in their formulation. This is like the new paperless version, if you will, of technology versus this is like the papered version, and there's just more cleanup involved. I don't know if that makes any sense. So hopefully that'll kind of help explain it. So when I say messenger RNA, you think USB drive, and it makes copies, and then that elicits an immune response. When you think Johnson & Johnson and AstraZeneca viral vector, you think delivery dump truck. I don't know if that helps. Okay. So, let me wear my glasses, sorry. So, reasons why, when you look at how these vaccines are performing in the early phase 3 clinical trials, why I'm so excited, is that they're performing really, really well. So in a good year, the flu vaccine may be 30 to 40% effective. And I've seen that happen in practice. They're like, I got the flu shot, it didn't make any difference, I got the flu. Sometimes people have inflammatory reactions to the flu vaccine, and they're like, I think I got the flu. And I'm like, no, you really didn't get the flu, but you got an inflammatory reaction to it, and it may have still even missed the mark. So these are far superior to flu vaccines. They're much more elegant. They're very efficient because they're very focused on the one thing that we want to recognize, which is the spike protein. Now, what's cool about that is coronaviruses tend to mutate less than the flu. So because they're mutating less, there's very good conservation of what that spike protein looks like. Spike doesn't have a elegant disguise. Like he's not like Jason Bourne, where he's, Bourne Identity, he can kind of take on different different ways that he can hide, right? So because the spike protein stays pretty much the same, you can have a vaccine that's very consistent in how it targets that, and that's part of why these work really, really well. The other things that are kind of involved with it is that oh, and one thing to note is this is all new territory. These are game changers. Like no mRNA vaccines have ever been approved before. So this is all new territory, which is I think why fear might be a hurdle for some people. And I was very skeptical. I can be very skeptical. I'm kind of a doubting Thomas. And after having researched this and understand how it works, I think it's probably the coolest vaccine yet that we've seen. A lot of them have problems because you have things that you have to attach to the protein that you're targeting, and they're called adjuvants, and they can cause inflammation. Recombinant vaccines that are like cell cultures and different things like that, often, you have contamination. There's people are allergic to eggs, those kind of things for the flu vaccine. So this is basically something that you can assemble digitally, if you will. So it's like I said, it's like the paperless version. You have a computer, you have a USB drive, so they can in the laboratory have genetic nucleotides, basically, that you give them instructions on how to assemble themselves. And they assemble themselves with the raw materials, and then bam, you've got your file, your digital file, if that makes any sense. So they're very clean, but because messenger RNA can be fragile and kind of unstable, the problems are going to be the execution and delivery of this vaccine. So cold temperatures, they're not like other vaccines that there's even one in the works that can be freeze-dried and reconstituted. That would be great for areas where very tropical, very hot areas where refrigeration would be a concern and you can't keep it adequately cold. So there's going to be a lot of logistical challenges, and we'll kind of do a video about that down the road. But main thing is, it's brand new, never been approved before. It could seem kind of scary. I think it's amazing technology, and I'm super excited about it. The good thing is, when they looked at these trials, and obviously we're gonna have to break down the data more as it emerges, 90 to 95% effective in creating what we call cell-mediated immunity. So you can have an inflammatory response to something, but it can fade. Cell-mediated immunity means you get certain specialized cells, kind of like your Navy SEALs, that they stick around and they know when they see Spike and they are going to take him out. And they are really good at it too. So that's the kind of immunity that you want. And the good thing is these vaccines seem to actually produce that. So it is safe. It seems effective for getting what we need to have happen in terms of conferring good immunity. So that is very encouraging. Let's see. I feel like I'm kind of going all over the place. But so those are, and here's the thing too. mRNA vaccines do not change your genome. So there's some fear that you're like, if you're making a vaccine with genetic material, is it going to actually alter my DNA? Well, that's why I gave the example of a house and a yard, right? Because the computer and the original file are inside the house. The house is locked. No one else can get in the house. But you can still have a USB drive that does the job, that doesn't corrupt the original file, if that makes any sense, so that it's protected and saved. So some vaccines that have like plasmid DNA, plasmids can be kind of, they can kind of get places that you don't want them to be, even though you may engineer them for that. There's still just always that like theoretical potential. And so that's not the case with mRNA. And I think that's why these are great vaccine candidates as well. So we talked about storage delivery challenges, the rollout. So here's the other thing. When we talk about herd immunity and vaccines, herd immunity is a phrase that was always kind of linked to vaccines. I've made comments about that before, that if you have herd immunity, it's not just wild type virus that kind of just circulates through the community and gets everybody sick at the same time, and whoever dies, dies, and whoever survives, survives. Well, the problem is we're almost a year into this and we're nowhere near herd immunity. And the problem is those people who got sick in the beginning, now their immunity is potentially fading, because even if it lasts for a total of a year, then we're there. So it's a moving target. You're not going to get everyone sufficiently sick at the same time to generate a certain threshold of herd immunity without crushing your healthcare system and endangering a lot of people. So vaccines are the way that we get there, because the people don't get deathly ill, but they still get adequate protection. They get an immune response rather than getting the virus, having to clear it, and then getting well and recuperating. So, and the example I've given before is if you have a room of 10 people in there and one person has the virus and they're trying to get, they're potentially going to get other people sick, not trying to, but they're contagious. And then you have 6 other people in the room that are vaccinated. That means you've got 3 people left, and maybe one of them has already had it and already has immunity. And so then you've got 2 other people that potentially could get sick. Versus if you have one person who has it who's contagious and nobody else has any immunity, then you've got 9 other people that can get sick. So it slows down transmission significantly when we all get vaccinated. So here's the thing. Again, it's a choice. You don't have to do it. I'm going to do it because I think this is the bomb in how it's constructed, and I think it's going to be very safe and it's going to be very effective. Now, other vaccine problems have been preservatives or other things in it like aluminum, thimerosal, which is like a mercury derivative. We get mercury if you eat a lot of seafood. There's different things. Those things can be problems for your mitochondria, which are part of your cellular respiration on like a cellular level. There are ways that you can detox from that, but ideally you don't want to take stuff in your vaccine that you don't have to have in there. So I'm going to be curious to see what their proprietary formulations are for these mRNA vaccines. Do they need a preservative? Do they have anything extra? Because a lot of the aluminum salts were in there to actually boost the immune reaction. Well, that may not be needed anymore, which again would be a game changer for vaccines. It would just become far, far cleaner and less of a concern for causing collateral damage, if you will. So, okay. And these can be designed really, really quickly, because when you have the DNA blueprint, you just make the negative of it, if you will, which is the messenger RNA, and then you're like, bam, done. There's no hit and miss or trial and error with it, because you have the blueprint there to work with. Okay, so we talked about viral vectors, which, interestingly enough, Johnson & Johnson and AstraZeneca, the ones who use viral vectors, are the ones that had to pause their trials because they had potential of an inflammatory reaction, and they're like, I don't know. So again, I don't want to put all my eggs in one basket and say only one type of vaccine is okay. I think there's going to take very many different types to kind of get us to the finish line. But it is interesting that the ones that they had to pause are the ones that used a viral vector. So it's kind of food for thought. Because there's always that sweet spot. You want to have a high enough dose to generate an immune response, but you don't want to go overboard and have a hyper immune response when you're trying to vaccinate a person. And then there are also, inactivated viruses, live attenuated viruses like the MMR, stuff that, we've known about for years, and I don't know if there's going to be candidates as well. There's also protein subunit viruses, which the most notable ones are Novavax and Sanofi GlaxoSmithKline. So those two actually just make the spike protein and they inject it in the body. And the body's like, what is this floating around? So they basically just circulate the wanted poster without doing anything within the cell. And then your body's like, let's look for this guy and clean up the mess. And so how effective that is, it depends on whether or not there's an adjuvant stuck with it or attached with it, because sometimes the protein is too small on its own to do the job. So it's like taking the wanted poster and then like adding something irritating like super glue or something sticky like rubber cement or something with it. So you're like, what is this? And I can't get it off my hands. And it's kind of more irritating to your system. It makes you pay more attention. If that helps make that easier to understand. The problem is you can get a reaction to the super glue or the rubber cement that's with it, and that could cause more problems. So I'm gonna link, I know this is has gone on a little while, but I'm gonna link a few files for you to look at, a few tables, one that I created myself, a couple that are within a paper, just that you can kind of look at if you're curious where some of this information is derived from. And then obviously we're just gonna have to be watching the news to see kind of what else comes along. But I think given their general formulation, and I know there's a lot of distrust of the scientific community if there's big pharma and profit and those things involved, to think that they're going to fudge their data to sell a product. But I think looking at how these are formulated, that's not going to be the case. I think they're going to be really good vaccines. How they're going to be distributed, how much they're going to cost, and if you're going to have a breakdown in the logistics is going to be the bigger questions. But they seem to have a low side effect profile. People tolerate them really well, and it gets the job done. So for that, I am hopeful. It's kind of like, it could be Christmas early. I said the two things I wanted for Christmas is, can we get a vaccine and can we get an at-home COVID test that you could monitor yourself rather than having to go through a lot of channels, just kind of like you'd have an at-home pregnancy test, you'd have an at-home COVID test, but it would have to be really reliable and not give you a lot of false positive or negative. So vaccine, maybe test is coming next. We'll see. But so thank you for listening and watching. If you found this really good and easy to understand and helpful to people that are confused about the issue, please like and share. This is public. I want people to be able to benefit from this knowledge and the research that I did. I have a YouTube channel, which, has like 30 subscribers, but if you go there, you can like and subscribe, and it would be the same content, but that may help me out as well to kind of just spread the message to people who are confused. And if you have any questions or comments, please put them down below, and I will try to answer them at some point in the future. So thank you for your time and listening, and take care, stay well, and get vaccinated.